On 14 November 2009, in South Haven, Michigan, a local man was out walking when he discovered a car engulfed in flames in a nearby forest. Alarmed, he immediately dialed 911. The South Haven Fire Department and Police Department quickly arrived at the scene. When the police got there, they found the car still smoldering, located not far from the main road. At first, they wondered whether someone had deliberately set the car ablaze, perhaps to claim insurance money or for some similar reason. Fire investigators from the South Haven Fire Department began searching the area for any evidence of a crime. About 100 yards from the car, one of them discovered a charred body lying at the base of a tree. They immediately contacted Central Dispatch, and the entire detective team arrived at the scene to investigate the case. The body had duct tape wrapped around the head and mouth. Both hands were tightly bound behind the back with duct tape. A large amount of duct tape was also wrapped around the victim's thighs. This was one of the most brutal murders they had ever seen or heard of. It was clear that the killer intended for the victim to suffer greatly. They began working to identify the victim in order to find leads. The car was completely burnt and unrecognizable, but a license plate found in the glove compartment remained intact. The registered owner of the vehicle was Brandon Silverlight. That's when they started tracing back, trying to determine where he was or whether he might be the victim. The investigators immediately went to Brandon's home and were greeted by his wife, Jennifer. They informed her about the discovery of Brandon's car and that they were trying to determine his whereabouts. Jennifer said that Brandon had left the house the previous night and hadn't returned since, nor had he responded to any of her calls or messages. They began asking her routine investigative questions. Born in Michigan in 1984, Brandon Silverlight grew up in South Haven. Robert Spear, a friend of Brandon's, said that Brandon came from a good family. He had wonderful parents and a solid upbringing. He was quite funny, very approachable, and always treated people well. After graduating high school in 2003, Brandon enrolled at Western Michigan University's School of Music. Brandon was highly gifted in music, and his family had a musical tradition. He received several scholarships and planned to become a music teacher. In the evenings and on weekends, Brandon performed at various venues around town with a local band. Robert Spear owned a band and had invited Brandon to join. According to Robert, Brandon was an excellent drummer and played bass very well. According to Jennifer, Brandon's wife, it was his love for music that first drew her to him in 2001. Jennifer was an attractive, confident, and opinionated woman. The couple dated for 7 years. In February 2008, they married at Lake Buena Vista, Florida. They had been together for many years before tying the knot, so their relationship was very strong. Nearly 2 years after their marriage, Brandon's car was found burned on the side of a rural road. The unidentified body parts suggested it might be a murder case. Jennifer truly didn't know what to think at the time. She said he had left the house around 10 p.m. to meet up with a group of people he played online games with. As the night grew later, Jennifer texted him, but he only responded very briefly before his phone went off. Calls went straight to voicemail and messages went unanswered. Jennifer said that Brandon occasionally went out to game with friends, but it was highly unusual for him to stay out all night like that. Rather than letting worry overwhelm her, Jennifer reassured herself that perhaps Brandon hadn't come home for some reason. Jennifer mentioned that at one point, they had had an open relationship. After their conversation with Jennifer, the investigators attended the autopsy. The victim's body was taken to Sparrow Hospital in Lansing for the examination. Due to the severe damage to the body, dental records were used to identify the victim. The victim was confirmed to be Brandon Silverlight. Now, they needed to dig deeper. Who might have wanted to kill him? Who were his enemies? On the 14th of November, 2009, the authorities in South Haven, Michigan, were investigating the brutal murder of Brandon Silverlight. From the autopsy results, the investigators learned that the victim had been stabbed multiple times across his body. He also had a laceration across his neck and had sustained several injuries from blunt force trauma to his head. the body had been set on fire. The autopsy revealed high levels of carbon monoxide in his lungs. He was still alive when he was set ablaze. It seemed that someone had dragged Brandon about 100 yards to beneath a tree, tortured him, stabbed him multiple times, and then set him on fire. This was undoubtedly a hate-filled murder. One could say that the person involved in this certainly intended to harm him and make him suffer. They began their investigation from the inside and worked their way outward, because often the closest people are either involved in a crime like this or have information about who might have done it. After the autopsy, the investigators had to break the tragic news to Brandon's wife, Jennifer. When the police informed Jennifer of the tragic news, she was deeply distraught. The investigators asked Jennifer about the state of her marriage to Brandon and whether it had led to any issues. Jennifer said that they had gone through some rough patches, but they had weathered them as young couples often do. She also mentioned that she had recently become pregnant and that they were looking forward to starting a family. Their marriage had grown closer since she found out she was pregnant. As a result, things were settling down. Perhaps their relationship was no longer as open as they had initially agreed it would be. Alison had once been an important part of Brandon's life. Before he married Jennifer, she had been his girlfriend. After concluding the interview with Jennifer, the investigators turned their attention to Alison Martin, a 22-year-old woman living in Kalamazoo, an hour's drive from South Haven. Detective O'Reilly and his colleague reached out to her and conducted a voluntary interview.
When was the last time that you actually physically saw Brandon?
It's almost been a year now.
Okay. All right. Have you talked to him or?
During the conversation, they only asked general questions. There were no accusatory questions at this point. Their goal was simply to gather basic information about Alison. Alison grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in a well-off family. Her parents were wealthy, and she had lived a privileged life. It seemed she had many opportunities, having graduated from a good high school in the area. However, Alison's work life was unstable. She had once worked at an animal kennel, but after that, she only took on odd jobs, nothing resembling a clear career path. The interview gradually shifted to Alison's past relationship with Brandon. She began recounting details about the time they dated and what had happened between them. From her account, it was clear that Alison met Brandon when she was just 16 years old. They met while Brandon was working part-time at a guitar shop. Alison would often stop by his workplace. The two dated for a while, but the relationship fell apart for various reasons. Alison insisted that she had moved on from Brandon and continued with her life. She recounted her dating history, mentioning 2 ex-boyfriends, and then said that she was currently engaged to Justin Terpstra. The investigators asked, "When was the last time you actually saw Brandon?" But the truth was that Alison had recently been in contact with Brandon. This suggested she might not have been entirely honest. After the interview, the investigators requested data from both Alison's and Brandon's phones. The results revealed that the two had been in frequent contact throughout the past week. A big question began to emerge: what was really going on between them? The examination of Alison's phone revealed a significant detail. On the evening of the 13th, Brandon Silverlight and Alison Martin had exchanged multiple text messages from their phones. In those messages, Alison urged, "Come on, let's meet up. I've got another woman. Let's get together, have some fun. Let's have sex. Let's try a 3-way." Brandon agreed, "All right." They discussed meeting at Cousins, a restaurant in South Haven. Another message confirmed, "Okay, we will meet at Cousins and then follow you to the trailer spot." Investigators discovered that on the 13th of November, Alison and Brandon had exchanged messages back and forth to finalize their plans. Those text messages were brimming with excitement. They revolved around lines like "Can't wait to see you tonight," clearly revealing the intentions of both parties. But what raised suspicion was that in her first interview with the police, Alison Martin insisted she hadn't seen Brandon in over a year. In a case like this, when evidence clearly shows someone is lying, it's often a sign they're hiding something much bigger. In the days following the brutal murder of Brandon Silverlight, 24 years old, investigators in South Haven, Michigan, discovered that he had made plans to meet his former girlfriend, Alison Martin, 22 years old, on the night he disappeared. As a result, the detectives decided that they would confront Alison. At that point, Detective O'Reilly confronted her, presenting the fact that they had data from the cell towers, that her phone was in South Haven, that she had been in South Haven, and that they had the content of the text messages. She flew into a furious rage.
Hey Allison, how are you? Can we talk to you for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
We wanted to go back over a couple other things with you, and I got a little confused when we talked the other night, and I had asked you when the last time you'd actually seen him, and then the last time you had any kind of contact with him whatsoever.
I can't remember. I really can't tell you. You can't do that. That's an invasion of privacy.
We have search warrants. We have court orders.
I want a lawyer. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I want a lawyer.
You know what, Allison? Quite honestly, you need a lawyer, and you better get a very good one. Thank you for your time.
When Alison no longer wished to talk, the investigators turned their attention to the person closest to her. The next step they took was to conduct research on her fiancé, Justin Terpstra. The detectives wanted to gather some information about Justin Terpstra before deciding to interview him. The investigators discovered that Justin, 24 years old, was born in Michigan and raised by his father. Justin Terpstra was born into a family of 4 siblings, 3 boys and 1 girl. Their family was not exactly poor, but nor were they wealthy. Their life was quite free, doing whatever they pleased. Justin, according to his relatives, was a cheerful, quick-witted, and lively young man, though rather mischievous. He was a jokester, he craved attention, but if he could not gain it in a positive way, he would turn to negative means. He was a bad boy, he drank alcohol and smoked. He had been in and out of various juvenile detention centers. He got into trouble for stealing, and then, while serving a sentence or facing whatever punishment for that, he would go and steal something else. A childhood friend of Justin said that he and Justin grew up together, and Justin always managed to get himself into minor trouble, just enough to be sent back to the juvenile detention center. At the age of 18, Justin was convicted of home invasion. After being paroled in June of the year 2009, Justin, 24 years old, secured a job at a local restaurant and began attending a nearby community college. He seemed ready to mature and do what was necessary to move forward in life. And then he met Alison. Their charming first meeting took place at Crow's Nest, a coffee shop across the street from the house where he was living. He had a mutual friend who introduced them. He truly only knew her for about 1 week before moving in with her. Alison seemed to be a good match for him because she wanted him to succeed and would be strict with him, urging him to give up bad habits and go to work to earn money. Justin liked that because he had always needed such firmness. After gathering basic information, the investigators tracked down Justin Terpstra. They learned that Terpstra was currently on parole. They promptly contacted the parole office and informed them about what they were working on. It turned out that Terpstra had reported to his parole officer but had failed to comply with part of his parole conditions, and subsequently, he was arrested again for violating those parole conditions and detained at the Kalamazoo County Jail. The investigators went to the jail to interview Justin, where he had been detained for the past few hours.
Well, I'd shake your hand, but since you're handcuffed, then I'm Detective O'Reilly, Detective Mathis from the Allegan County Sheriff's Department. I'm going to be straight forward with you, okay? There was a homicide over the weekend, okay, just north of South Haven, and we've already talked to Allison.
The person is deceased is her ex-boyfriend.
Do you know Brandon Silverlight?
No, the only Brandon I know is my brother.
He said that he did not know Brandon, had never met him, and truly knew very, very little about him.
And the status of your relationship is you're engaged? Yes. We're actually planning on getting our marriage license pretty soon.
You're not involved.
No.
You got a good girl that you think loves you, and then you find out that maybe She does love you, but she may have feelings for somebody else. It's logical to think that. Another logical thing could be that she takes off, you're not really sure where she's going, so you follow her and catch her in the act. Maybe you went to kick his ass or something, and things got out of hand, correct?
In my mind, it just seems so out the wall ridiculous.
According to Justin, he was at Alison's house in Kalamazoo on the night the murder took place.
We have not done your cell phone yet. We're going to do your cell phone. If you're lying to us, you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. That's simple. Okay?
As the interview continued, the investigators noticed that Justin had some injuries on his arm.
Okay, what you got over here?
Burns here.
Those are burns? Did you report that at all?
Well, I mean, yeah, it was a grease burn from the fryers.
You go back to your cell, go back to your bunk, and you rest well.
The fact that he had burns was clearly suspicious and most likely indicated that he was indeed involved in the murder of Brandon Silverlight. In the initial interviews with the police, Alison Martin and her fiancé, Justin Terpstra, both denied any knowledge of Brandon Silverlight's murder. However, the investigators knew Alison was lying, and they strongly suspected Justin was as well. Justin claimed that he was not in South Haven on the night of the murder. Therefore, investigators filed a request for his phone location data. In the meantime, they reviewed the messages between Alison and Brandon. The investigators know that on the evening of the 13th, there were many text message exchanges between Brandon Silverlight's telephone and Alison Martin's telephone. They discuss meeting each other at a restaurant in South Haven, and then he would follow Alison to the trailer. It was discovered that Alison's parents owned a summer trailer. It was located in a gated area. The trailer owned by the Martin family was less than half a mile from where the burned car and the body were found. The initial reaction of one of the investigators was a shocked realization that they needed to get to the trailer immediately. Armed with a search warrant, the team entered the trailer and found no evidence suggesting that any struggle had occurred there. However, the steps leading into the mobile home were misaligned. The stones around them had been disturbed. It was clear that something had happened there. There was also a piece of duct tape, folded over on itself, lying on the ground on the concrete surface. The piece of duct tape was highly significant because it matched the way Brandon had been bound at the crime scene. That was the location where the investigators believed the initial attack or assault on Brandon had taken place. The detectives returned to the station and obtained the evidence they needed when they received the location data from Justin's phone. Both Justin Terpstra's and Alison Martin's phones were in South Haven in the early morning hours of the 14th. Armed with evidence showing that Justin had lied to the investigators, they brought him in for a second interview. Justin was confronted with evidence showing that he was near the scene. They talked to him time after time, and finally, he confessed that he was indeed the one who killed Brandon Silverlight. He said, "I did it. Alison had nothing to do with this."
I stabbed him several times.
After Justin's confession, the authorities charged him with murder. Tess Terpstra, Justin's sister, said that she was truly shocked when she heard the news. To her, Justin might be a thief and might commit crimes, but actually killing someone was something she never thought he could do. George Schultz, Justin's best friend, said that he was so stunned he couldn't believe it, adding that he had known Justin his whole life and that Justin was not a violent person like that. As the investigators continued to build the case against Justin, they contacted his family, who explained that Justin had previously mentioned that he didn't like Brandon Silverlight. Brandon Terpstra, Justin's younger brother, said that Justin had talked about Brandon, Alison Martin's ex-boyfriend, and how he kept contacting and harassing her. He explained that Justin felt Brandon was a threat to Alison Martin based on what she said and how she said it. Brandon Terpstra noted that this was how Justin described the situation to him, mentioning that Justin's girlfriend, Alison Martin, was scared of her ex-boyfriend, and if he didn't stop, Justin would have to intervene. After speaking with Justin's loved ones, the authorities attempted to verify Justin's claim that Brandon had been harassing Alison Martin. Alison Martin had never reported anything related to Brandon Silverlight stalking, harassing, or assaulting her. The detectives stated that, in fact, Brandon Silverlight had filed a complaint about being stalked by Alison Martin, which they believed was in 2007, at the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety. Brandon Silverlight had stated that she repeatedly made unwanted phone calls to him and, he believed, even showed up at his house uninvited. As a result, the police investigated and interviewed Alison Martin, and she admitted to the police that she was indeed obsessed with Brandon Silverlight. She explained that Brandon was her first love, and although she had other boyfriends afterward, their relationship would sporadically rekindle. Therefore, Brandon held a lot of significance for her. The detectives and investigators stated that they knew Alison Martin was lying and not being completely honest with Justin. At that time, the law enforcement team believed that the motive for the crime stemmed from Alison Martin, from her inability to have Brandon Silverlight in the way she wanted. And if she couldn't, then no one else was allowed to either. In Allegan County, Michigan, the authorities charged Justin Terpstra with the murder of Brandon Silverlight. However, they believe that his fiancée, Alison Martin, played a larger role than he admitted. Alison Martin still insists that she is not the one responsible for this. Therefore, they need more evidence. 20 days after the case began, a local resident named Sean West contacted the investigators and provided incriminating information about Alison Martin. Sean West is a friend of both Justin Terpstra and Alison Martin. Sean West said that during Thanksgiving dinner, he asked Alison Martin what had happened because he had heard some rumors and knew that Alison and Brandon Silverlight had once been a couple. Sean West stated that Alison Martin confessed to him. She told him, "I stabbed him first." According to Sean, she wanted him to feel the pain, and she mentioned that the feeling was like stabbing a chicken. Justin was arrested, and Alison Martin told Sean West to pass a message to Justin Terpstra, saying that he should take the blame if he spoke to him again. Therefore, that was very important information. The investigators immediately issued an arrest warrant for Alison Martin. On December 7th, she turned herself in. Her lawyer contacted the prosecutor's office, but she did not provide any statements to the investigators. Since Alison did not cooperate, the investigators interviewed Justin for the third time, hoping that he would betray his fiancée. Alison Martin invited or promised Brandon Silverlight a threesome with her, him, and another unnamed woman. Justin said that he forced Alison Martin to help him commit that crime. Essentially, he intended to take the blame for Alison. Justin continued to insist that Alison Martin was afraid of Brandon Silverlight's harassment and made another shocking allegation. Justin said that Alison had claimed that Brandon Silverlight had sexually assaulted her. In his mind, Brandon Silverlight treated Alison Martin very badly in their relationship, and he believed that Brandon was trying to get back with Alison. The investigators knew that she had used this story to get what she wanted. Alison was looking for someone to kill Brandon because she could no longer have him. Under intense pressure, Justin slowly began to break down. Eventually, he told the police that she was involved as well. The investigators knew that once he realized she had lied, he blamed her. In the interrogation before his arraignment on the 8th of December 2009, Justin Terpstra stated that his fiancée, Alison Martin, was involved in the plot to murder her former boyfriend, Brandon Silverlight. Justin said that they had tried to lure him to the Kalamazoo area before the South Haven area, but that plan had never succeeded. He added that it then developed into a possibility of an intimate encounter involving a threesome. He explained that this was the bait to get him there. It was uncertain what Brandon's mindset was, though it appeared to have sparked his interest. It was recounted that Alison had dropped Justin off at the trailer before she met Brandon at the restaurant. At that point, Brandon had followed Alison to the trailer. Justin explained that when Alison and Brandon arrived at her parents' trailer for the threesome, he had been waiting there. The investigators stated that Justin Terpstra had struck him on the head, and they believed that this had knocked him unconscious. The investigators recounted that afterward, they used duct tape to bind his legs and ankles, then dragged him to his car and took him to the crime scene. They described how they pulled him out and used duct tape to tie him to a tree. They noted that both wanted Brandon to die, but they intended to torture him before ultimately killing him. They concluded that, in the end, they set him on fire and killed him, attempting to cover up the crime by burning his car. This was deemed a premeditated, cold-hearted, and purely evil act. The motive was identified as Alison's revenge, with evidence showing she was obsessed with Brandon Silverlight. It was observed that she was furious because he had found someone else. A personal theory suggested that if she could not have him, then no one else would be allowed to have him either. This was considered perhaps one of the most heinous cases, showing the greatest disregard for human life, witnessed in 30 years of work. It was described as almost too cruel to contemplate, with genuine sympathy expressed for Brandon's family who had to endure this ordeal, and it was affirmed that no one deserved such a fate. Alison Martin and Justin Terpstra were tried separately in the fall of 2010. At Alison's trial, the prosecutors presented evidence showing that Brandon's former girlfriend remained fixated on him after their breakup. It was noted that she had no prior criminal history, but she had a record of numerous boyfriends and unusual behavior, marked by obsessive tendencies. It was recounted that she had tried to manipulate previous boyfriends into attacking Brandon, but those efforts failed because they did not believe the lies she told. Unfortunately, Justin Terpstra did believe her. It was believed that she must have fed him terrible lies to convince him that Brandon would do harmful things to her, prompting him to retaliate. It was evident that he genuinely thought Brandon was a very bad person and felt he was keeping her safe. It was clear that Alison Martin, in a way that could not be described otherwise, was simply a master manipulator. Throughout their trials, both pointed the blame at each other. Justin's attorney argued that everything stemmed from Alison, while Alison and her attorney contended that it was all due to Justin. The evidence plainly showed that Justin and Alison had lured Brandon to that remote location with the specific intent to murder him. Both were convicted of first-degree murder, which in the state of Michigan automatically results in life imprisonment with no chance of parole. It was uncertain whether Brandon's family ever felt a sense of closure. Not when the perpetrators were arrested, not when they were convicted, nor when they were sentenced. For Brandon's family, it was believed this amounted to a life sentence of their own. A family member of Justin expressed that having a brother capable of such an act was heartbreaking, adding that sadness was felt, yet it was acknowledged that he had made his choices and must face the consequences. It was thought that Alison had manipulated Justin, and Justin, coming from a broken family, had found a golden opportunity with Alison and her family, compelling him to do whatever she wanted to maintain it. When these two were brought together, it simply turned into pure evil. Brandon did not deserve anything like this. He should still be here with his family, watching his child grow up. It was tragic for his family, for his wife, and for everyone who had ever known him.
You've caused untold damage to our lives, yours, and others. Parents aren't supposed to bury their children because of your selfishness. We had to. We didn't have the chance to look at them. It was a closed casket.
You are a parasite and a predator. You abuse others for your own gain and are fully aware of it. You are a pathological liar, a deceiver who manipulates and ruthlessly plows your way, leaving a trail of broken hearts, shattered expectations, and empty wallets. Without a second thought of the consequences,